On this edition of Independent Sources, Rangel's rival. Will history repeat itself in Northern Manhattan's 13th district, or will all party lines hold fast in a political tussle that's poised to fracture the community? And Greek philosophy, one publisher's dream to raise Greece from the ashes while the world watched it burn.
Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Viano Ravinca.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. When State Senator Pedro Espaillat declared he would challenge longtime Representative Charlie Rangel in the Democratic primary for the 13th Congressional District, he was sending a message. He says it was to bring new ideas to Congress. However, many political insiders are interpreting this as a political gambit that could split Northern Manhattan along racial lines.
Espaillat could become the first Dominican in Congress. He's going up against Rangel, who is black and also the dean of New York's congressional delegation. He's represented the city for more than 40 years. But times are changing in Harlem and surrounding areas. The once majority black population is dwindling, replaced by more Latinos.
That and the fact that the embattled Rangel has faced censure from the Congress and has been dealing with his own health issues has many asking if this may be the end of an era. This sets a very similar stage to Rangel's own rise to power in the 70s. Back then, he defeated a sham Adam Clayton Powell Jr. I sat down with political strategist Pedro Espaillat and journalist Juan Manuel Benitez to talk about the race. Pedro, you've been watching the politics in Harlem for quite some time. Is this the first significant challenge to Charlie Rangel's fiefdom, if you will, in Harlem?
It is the first one in probably 15, 16 years where you can point to one very strong alternative. In the past, he's had a number of candidates oppose him, 4, 5, 6 candidates opposing him. And what that does is it obviously dilutes the anti-Rangel votes. And although you have 3 candidates running against him right now that are declared, we have Clyde Williams, Joyce Johnson, who ran before and in fact got the endorsement in the New York Times when she ran, and now obviously Pedro Espaillat, the state senator, former member of the Assembly. And this is the first time that there is one very, very strong opponent that actually comes with a significant constituency that is already within the congressional district.
Which is?
The 13th Congressional District.
No, which constituency?
Well, just the fact that his Senate district is within the actual congressional district.
Well, one of the constituents that Espaillat brings to the table is a Latino or Hispanic vote. Manuel, what do you think about that situation? Is that really an asset to him?
Of course. He's selling himself as the first Dominican congressman in the country. So for the Dominican community that now apparently is going to have a strong voice in that new district, is going to be they're going to feel proud and to vote for him. Now, this is in theory. Now he needs more than Dominicans to go vote for him. He needs maybe the whole Latino community. That's going to be tricky because you have Puerto Ricans and you have Dominicans, and Puerto Ricans have been really loyal to Charlie Rangel for many, many years. And we don't know which community is going to be stronger. Is it going to be the Puerto Rican community or the Dominican community? Also, Pedro Espaillat has been in the district for quite some time already as an assemblyman and now as a state senator. Are all the Dominicans in the district really aligned with Pedro Espaillat, or are they tired, or do they have any kind of fights, little fights in the last few years with him that is going to make them vote for Charlie Rangel? That's a question.
Yeah, and what's interesting, as you raised that, the congressional district itself is primarily Latino. That's Puerto Rican community, that's Dominican community, and others.
Yeah, Mexican community.
Mexican community. It is a predominantly Latino community. But if you break down the voting percentages, the Latino community and African American community are almost the same. And then you have a smaller number of white votes, maybe about 20, 25% white voters, which actually is smaller than what Rangel used to have in that district. And now it also includes a portion of the Bronx. So including the Dominican community in Washington Heights, that portion of the Bronx, where neither of them have had to establish any relationships in the past, is going to be a bit of a battleground. And I believe Adriano just got the endorsement of a state senator over there, Gustavo Rivera. And so it makes this race fascinating.
You know, Rangel has had a very strong relationship with the Puerto Rican community. Can that community coalesce around him and help him carry the day?
So far, most of Puerto Rican elected officials are behind him. And I know we can't forget that even though he never talks about it, Charlie Rangel's dad was Puerto Rican. Rangel is Rangel. It's a Spanish last name. So he might get that constituency too. I think the big problem with Charlie Rangel, more than anything, in the new district is that he's losing a really loyal constituency in the Upper West Side that is not in that district anymore. And those were white progressives that are not part of the district.
But Rangel, to some would argue, stopped being a progressive a while ago and is ethically challenged.
Well, there are people that would argue he's stopped being a lot of things a long time ago. But you know, he still is has been very, very strong, very popular on the Upper West Side. Now, I actually ran for office, just full disclosure, 2 years ago against Bill Perkins.
Yes.
So it was in some of the same geography. And what's interesting is when I went out there, there were a lot of people, just as many that said supported Charlie Rangel, and that was really concentrated in central Harlem. A lot of folks on the Upper West Side were not very supportive of him. And if you look at the primary numbers from that race in 2010, he got only 52% of the vote, which means 48% of the district did not want him or wanted somebody else. So the question, and I think after almost a year of a lot of being maligned in the press quite a bit, a lot of negative attention in the press and in the media also helped get that result. You don't have that this time. So you don't have such a negative feeling about him in the community, but you do have, for the first time in quite some time, you know actually where his votes are and are not coming from. And a good opponent, and if it's Adriano or someone else, could may have the opportunity to actually go and go after those votes. We'll see.
Juan Manuel, has Espaillat been able to galvanize the Latino community, or is it just Dominican? Has he reached out to other Latinos in the district?
Of course, he's tried, but it's not that easy to galvanize the whole Hispanic community. We can't forget how the Puerto Rican community or the Puerto Rican elected officials are really close to the African American elected officials because they helped each other for many, many years. And now you have the new variable, Dominican elected officials, that sometimes have different maybe interests than the African American community, and the Puerto Rican community is caught in the middle. So I think it's really complicated to galvanize the entire Latino community, also because as I said before, Charlie Rangel has strong connections with the Latino community too. So that's why I think Adriano Espaillat is trying to sell himself as the first Dominican congressman. That's why he's trying to capitalize on that in his district to get most of the Dominican vote and then some of the Puerto Rican vote maybe in other areas of the district.
Is being the first Dominican important enough? Does it resonate enough with voters that they will coalesce around Espaillat and say, yes, we got to do this. This is about time?
Oh, of course it is. Go to the Asian community in Queens and listen to the conversation around Grace Meng. It's of course it's important. It's a huge milestone and benchmark in the sort of political ascendancy of the community, and as it relates to New York politics globally. And going back to your earlier point, the Dominican community, Puerto Rican community, African American community, they've had alliances for quite some time. And I don't think, as some people have tried to portray this as black versus Latino or Dominican, it's really about old alliances versus new alliances. Okay. Those new alliances are not just black and Dominican, it's also with a lot of the younger blacks that are moving into Harlem, a lot of the white families that are moving into Harlem as well, and new business leaders, new clergy members, new community leaders. So it's a broader conversation about what Harlem actually looks like today versus 30, 40 years ago, and who's a member of these sort of new alliances.
What has Espaillat done to really raise his profile?
So far?
Yes.
Well, he's been a politician for quite some time.
Sure.
And And
But now he's going outside of his base, outside of his district. So
well,
some
he's going
extent.
a little bit further into like other parts of his constituency so far. I think he's trying, like I said, to galvanize that Dominican American vote, because that's what he's trying to do. He's portraying himself as a Barack Obama opportunity. I'm going to be the first Dominican. That's how he's selling himself. So I think that's going to be the most important part of his campaign. Also, because he's not trying to make this campaign into the Harlem campaign. This is really important because for many African Americans and for the political class, this is a symbol of Black America. And all of a sudden, you have this Dominican politician trying to take that away, in a sense, from them. That could have national ramifications in how the African American political power is portrayed and is used in the future.
Yeah.
There was a meeting, from my understanding, led by Reverend Al Sharpton recently, where, they brought in Latino elected officials with African American officials, and at the end, I think they all agreed there's a shift going on, and they're going to have to accept it.
Yeah, they do. And again, it goes back to the old versus new alliances, and I think I take your point that there is some conversation about what happens when the soul of Black America is not represented by an African American. But Harlem is changing, and I think part of that concern is shared among older residents. Those older residents are generally tied to the political clubs and are tied to Rangel very significantly. Newer residents, younger residents just want some good leadership. They want dynamic leadership that they can feel confident in, and that can make positive change and be responsive to them. And frankly, I've talked to a lot of them, and they're up in the air, which is amazing to me.
And a lot of excitement among Latinos in that district.
A lot of excitement, but we don't know what's going to happen June 26th because it's a really strange, weird primary at a really strange date. The whole result is going to depend on who is bringing their voters out to the polls. I think it's going to be key more than any time before in this time.
Well, thanks a lot for a wonderful conversation. Juan Manuel Benitez, Bezos Michael, thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
Thank you.
Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. From the Amsterdam News, Mayor Mike Bloomberg is not in favor of forcing businesses to pay employees a living wage. The Fair Wages for New Yorkers Act is a proposed bill that would require the city to give taxpayer dollars to developers and major employers as an incentive to pay employees a minimum of $11.50 per hour. The current minimum wage in New York is $7.25 an hour. Bloomberg says he plans to veto the bill because he feels it's not the government's business to have businesses pay employees more. He also says such a law might deter businesses from coming into the city. The mayor says if his veto is overridden by city council, he will take the issue to court. Advocates hoping to restore the state's budget for runaway and homeless youth fell short of their goal, Gay City News reports. Last April, the Cuomo administration cut funding for homeless youth in half, from $4.7 million to roughly $2.6 million, in an effort to close the state's $10 billion deficit. A broad coalition called the Campaign for Youth Shelter pressed to have the budget increase by $3 million, but only won about $200,000. According to the 2007 census, of the more than 3,000 homeless youth, 24 and younger, an estimated 35 to 40% identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, or questioning. 2 Chinese publications are reporting on poor working environments at some of the city's nail salons. The Queens Tribune highlights a case in which 3 Chinese workers in Flushing sued their employer, Korean-owned Babi Nail Salon. They claimed they were physically abused, taunted with racial slurs, and they were paid $3 or less per hour. The jury ordered Babi Nail Salon to pay the workers $250,000. Meanwhile, the World Journal reports that several workers from Nepali nail salons joined an organization seeking better working conditions in the city's 3,500 nail salons. The organization, called Adhikar, plans to conduct a survey to expose poor working conditions in the industry. That from Voices of New York. From Novogenic, one man is on the verge of getting a prosthetic leg thanks to some generous Polish residents in Greenpoint. After Ladislaw Dubiel lost his leg in a subway accident 6 years ago, His goal was to get a prosthetic leg before he returns to Poland so he wouldn't be a burden on his family. A volunteer for Achilles International, an organization that assists the disabled, saw his story. Achilles then held a fundraiser for Dubiel to pay for his leg, which cost $19,000. So far, they've been able to raise $17,000 from directors at the credit union, businessmen, and Polish-American organizations. Dubiel is now looking for ways to raise the remaining $2,000 and money for his plane ticket back to Poland. And finally, Dominican barbers in Bushwick have become renowned for exotic design cuts and shaved patterns. El Diario La Prensa reports that customers come from as far as the Bronx, Long Island, and New Jersey to get a haircut from Dominican barbers in Bushwick. One barber, named Edwin Colblaze, has a celebrity clientele that includes popular reggaeton artist Daddy Yankee and members of the Puerto Rican band Calle 13. Those were just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Back to Gary and Vianora.
And finally from us tonight, we profile Neo, a magazine born 7 years ago out of the minds of 3 Greek immigrants. The monthly has recently grown from its place on the newsstand to having one on the airwaves.
Producer Zyphus LeBrun tells us more about the magazine and one of the men behind it in this report.
Murals and business signs along streets in Astoria hail the community's Greek heritage. Nestled along a quiet block in the neighborhood is Neo magazine and radio station.
Well, on to Greece again.
Go back to 2004 with the Olympics.
Dimitrios Rompotis founded the magazine with 2 of his friends just over 6 years ago.
In the beginning, we thought about a newspaper. And then we said that maybe a magazine is a better idea because it looks better. And it's something that then we didn't have in the community.
10,000 copies of the magazine are circulated on the east and west coasts, as well as to some emerging Greek communities in the Midwest. Rompotis says he does not back away from hard-hitting issues that focus on what he calls the community's ghetto mentality.
There are stuff to say and to talk about, and there are stuff that you need to expose, but you have to do it in a way that you don't just create some uproar and then things cool down and die. You have to know how to keep the fire, burning until the time comes that then it will be impossible for them not to do something. Right?
His philosophy and fire are obvious in his politics. While much of the mainstream media was telling the rest of the world that Greece was burning, he wasn't buying it. In fact, he was trying to paint a different picture of what was happening in his home country.
About 10% of all that stuff is true. What happens is that it's like when you are in school, when you go in school, if you somehow project yourself as the weak guy, everybody's beating you, everybody is talking bad about you, This is what's happening with Greece right now.
The magazine's success led Rompotis to start Radio Neo in the fall of 2010. The station is heard on a sub-carrier frequency that reaches most of the tri-state area. They've partnered with a station in Greece that produces some of their programming. Radio Neo airs programs in English, Greek, and at least one in Spanish.
It's the second linguistic group in the US after the English speakers. So it makes absolute sense to me to just, build bridges and make closer ties with that community. Why not? I wish we had the resources and ways to perhaps do the same with other ethnic groups.
Even with a contracting economy and figures showing declining newspaper sales, Rompotis points to other numbers that show an increase in magazine sales over the last few months. That's enough for him to keep dreaming big.
My dream is that one day Neo will become the Greek American community's Vanity Fair. So as for the radio, I wish we could be a kind of Pacifica radio.
Yes, okay.
But more to the practical and intellectual side of it.
Right.
Always the philosopher, Rompotis puts it this way. Once you trigger someone's intellect, it's a good start. Zyphus LeBrun, Independent Sources.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Till next time, be independent-minded.